Hello, good morning, evening, whatever, depending on where you're. How are you guys doing? Sorry for yesterday. I didn't show up because my daughter's teething. So we've been having like yesterday and today has been tough. But yeah, I didn't really sleep too much because I was watching the election, at least the start of it, until it was pretty obvious who would win. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go to bed. And then got nuked the next day by a teething baby, is what it is. But we're here now. Prices are up, as expected, honestly, on a Trump win. Kind of obvious, especially given the promises he's made. We'll talk about all of that, and then we'll also go over some altcoins. I think they're in a really interesting spot because of the Trump win. And yeah, before we do all that, big shout out to Woo for sponsoring the show. Really appreciate their support. Go check them out. Their links are in the description below. And yeah, thanks for coming by. And thanks to Woo for sponsoring the show. Appreciate that. Early surprise for Don. I mean, it's late technically. I think we're late by almost 20 hours. Is what it is. Are we gonna make it, Don? I mean, we've already made it, no? I mean, Bitcoin went from $1 to 75. We already made it. It feels toppish with this volume. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be careful with calling the tops this early. I think it's a little bit foolish to chase, but it's not like this went up a lot. It's up as much as it's barely above all-time high. So I'm not entirely sure. I'm down to be bearish or more bearish if we lose the all-time high again, but like the old all-time high. But until then, I don't really see a good point. But we'll talk about it. So far, it's playing out as predicted when I did that squiggly line. This was if Biden's gonna win. Biden. if Harris is gonna win, and this one if Trump wins. And I still think that's fairly accurate. We did that last stream. I did one on Twitter that was obviously a meme, where I did like if Harris wins, whatever. Just a more accurate one. This from 2 weeks ago. I don't know. You guys remember better than I do. I mean, we just broke from 7-month range, so let's not start instantly fudding. Yeah, I mean, I get where he's coming from. Basically, his position, I assume, right, is that the whole Trump win was being priced in, and now that it's over and done with, and we've had an impulse, you can fade it. But I think it's a little bit early. Like the craziness hasn't really started yet. It doesn't have to, right? Like, and if he's right and it just falls down, I think it's very unlikely, right? Like that you just go down from here without doing something like a little bit more crazy. But I mean, it's always possible, right? But if it did happen, I think the chances of it would be like the chances of that happening are low, I think. So I think it's indeed the wrong place to FUD. I think a little bit lower would make more sense. And I mean, we've been saying this for a while now with Bitcoin, right? Where I was like, you can FUD this thing lower, and it just never goes lower, right? And I still think we're in that same position. Where did my there we go. I don't even know, like, when the fuck did we? I don't remember. But it was on stream, I'm sure. PTSD from 7 months shop. People say this rally will fail just like the last. Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for Trump promising that he would like have Bitcoin as like a strategic asset in like the government, like start buying Bitcoin basically as the US, I would be more inclined to kind of be like, okay, this might be like a little bit of like a bullshit rally. it's weaker than it was expected to, right? But given all of that, it kind of feels to me like people are doing the same thing they did before the ETF, right? If you remember, we talked about the ETF down here, right? So ETF was announced, we pumped, it fell all the way back down, and then everyone forgot about it. It was like, it's so bearish, whatever. And we did this on the show, right? And I was like, it makes no sense to like beat, like, especially after this move. I remember this pretty clearly. When we were trading down here, I was like, I don't like that we're back at the lows, but if we get a little bit of an up move and kind of like 26K holds, that's bullish because we're getting an ETF. And then we rallied into the ETF, right? And we obviously rallied harder, but like that move was pretty telegraphed, right? Like when we had a little bit of an up move here and then like the ETF was coming, was pretty obvious. And I think we might be in a like somewhat similar situation where you get like an up move that is quite telegraphed, and it kind of makes sense narrative wise. So like I'm more on the side of the bulls than the bears. Don't really see a good reason to be bearish. Like if I wanted to, could always make something up, but it's really hard right now. Like the monthly still good, the weekly good, the daily good. I mean, you can make something up, but it's hard. In the past, we only had a couple of good news. Now we have BlackRock, Elon, United States, President, ETF, and everything else. And we've been having lackluster ADH breaks. What's changed since 2020? That's basically the bearish arguments that people make. I don't think it's like people just kind of like don't know how big this market has gotten, right? Like a big market trades differently than a small market. When Bitcoin was tiny and it took very little money, then I mean, you had crazy moves, right? Now Bitcoin is at 70K, almost, like it's so close to 100K, where the market cap is significant enough that you don't get these kind of moves as much anymore. So I don't necessarily think that's like just, oh yeah, everything's fucked, we're like barely above all-time high and we're not doing anything. I think it's basically just the market has changed significantly with one, the ETF, and two, with just the market cap that we have now. So if you're like surprised that it trades differently, fair enough, because it does. But I think I would not necessarily just be like, hey, it trades differently, that therefore it has to be bearish or bullish. It just trades differently. ETH BTC catch-up trade, the move now. I like ETH. I mean, people were memeing on me literally last. Did you see the, like, if, I don't know if any of you watched the Friday show Cred and I make together, or if you just come here for the live stream. But like I was like, technically ETH's an area of support. Like that's, you wanna be looking for strength here, not for weakness. And then people in the YouTube comments actually roasted me for it. And ETH's actually outperformed this. This is the monthly chart. So since beginning of the month, it's been going up, and we had a good week this week. I find it quite funny how sentiment has shifted so fast in ETH. It's not the best, right? Like just because it went up a little bit, but looks good. Yeah, we'll talk about it in a sec. We'll finish Bitcoin and then we'll talk about it. So yeah, monthly time frame, kind of walking up. Generally think that is bullish unless you lose this red line. And that's very unlikely. And the reason why I'm saying that is basically because that red line at 71K, right, is, I think, like we had the Trump election, just, I mean, whether it's like, however you look at it, you can say like, hey, this bad news, good news, whatever, it doesn't really matter, right? But it's good news short term for crypto. And what I do when you have news events, right, is if you have good news, like just generally when you have good news and the price goes up, if that good news is retraced, and especially if it's actually good news, right? Like a bunch of people are like, oh, Elon tweeted about Bitcoin. This is not good news, right? But like actual fundamental good news, then if you fully retrace it, the market is inherently bearish, right? And I think when you look at the daily time frame, like if you get anywhere close to like 71, that would be a massive sign of weakness. And so like if you close below 71, that would be bearish. And then you can start bear charting all you want. Then you actually have a chart that kind of supports that too, because you broke the all-time high, couldn't follow through, coupled with the fact that you have good news in that high and it didn't hold, right? Like at that point, 100%, I mean, be as bearish as you want. I would be too. Like at that point, I would even whip out, like if it was the good old days, I would start shorting, right? Like I think that would be such a clear signal where you catch a lot of people off guard. And then fair enough, right? But until that happens, I think it's like you're just being overeager. And I think the reason why a lot of people do that, they're like, let me just, this is a breakout, let me short it, is because they're upset that they missed the breakout. But that's just kind of silly, no? Like that's just you being like ego driven more than anything else. Like that's not a system. That's just being like, hey, fuck this. It broke out. I didn't make any money. Everyone else made money. They need to lose their money. So that I look better, and that's just fucking stupid, right? So that's not the way to look at it, in my opinion. I think it makes a lot of sense to be bullish on the monthly, and we'll go through the time frames, and you see that this is across the board pretty much the case. But it makes sense to be bullish on this thing until proven otherwise. And the good thing is that you're getting really good invalidations. And if anything, right, like if you see that, like if you're like, hey, there's an invalidation at 71k, and like if I'm wrong and we lose 70, if anything, like having that close of an invalidation makes for like decent entries on the long side rather than the short side. So I think right now it doesn't really make much sense on the high time frames to be bearish. The weekly time frame is pretty similar. Like if you want to make the bearish case, which one was the monthly line? Doesn't really matter too much, but we don't need to see this one on the weekly or on daily or on the hourly. So the weekly time frame, pretty much just the same story. If you want to be bearish, and how that would look like would basically be this, and I had it on the Binance chart earlier, would be if you go sideways here, poke up, go down, like that'd be a typical kind of way to trade this bearishly, right? And then fair enough, right? Like if you start breaking down here, but I think below, like in the weekly time frame, it has to be below 70k where you turn bearish. So close below 71 on the monthly, close below 69 on the weekly, like those kind of areas, right? Like anything below here would be bad news. Until then, don't really see a good reason to be too bearish. Chart wise, if you have fundamental reasons, if you're like, hey, Trump is president and that's going to nuke the stock market because Trump is an idiot, if that's your reasoning, fair enough, right? Like if the stock market goes down into this breakout on Bitcoin, it's going to start looking really ugly real fast. But I don't really subscribe to that belief. So I'm just like, I just don't think about it too much. I'm just saying, like, chart wise, no reason to panic. So that's that, right? And then when you go on the daily time frame, you also have a breakout and you also have a relatively nice invalidation. You have a resistance that's been tested once, 2, 3 times. I mean, you could argue that that's 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Got front ran a little bit here, technically 5, 6, and now we broke through. And this is where people have an issue with this chart, right? Because considering the news we had, which is Trump win, and he promises to buy all the Bitcoin, this is indeed a shit breakout, right? Like this is nothing. Like sentiment is over the top. People are euphoric as fuck. And we are trading 2% above where we were trading before he got elected. Like that's where people are freaked out. And like I explained, I think the reason why this is trading so slowly, and this could just be me coping, right? Because I would prefer it if it actually didn't invalidate the bulls, but just went up. But the reason why this is such a shitty breakout to me is because one, a bunch of people front ran the Trump win. Like all the crypto people were like almost 100% convinced that Trump was gonna win, which I mean, hats off, right call. I was like more in the 50-50, like maybe I said 55-45 for Trump before. But given how it ended, I would say that was technically wrong. Even though like I said, like I think Trump has more odds. Given that he won in a landslide, I should have given him even more odds than what I gave him. And if I actually like gave him the odds everyone else gave him in crypto, I probably would have just been like, okay, I'm actually gonna just trade into this thing, because at that point, like if you're that certain, I mean, might as well, right? But anyway, like the news were good. The breakout was kind of like lame. I think it's because the market cap is so big and because every single crypto person was already long into the breakout, and then a bunch of people are taking profit on leverage. A bunch of people might take some off because it was a big move for a day, but it's not a big move higher time frame, right? Like look, this candle here might be big, but it's not as like we didn't have any news in here, like this, and it went up more, right? So this is nothing out of the ordinary. And like I said, it's 2% above the prior high, but it has its reasons. I think we're gonna trade more and more like gold. So if you look at gold and you have all-time high breakouts on gold, and that just nothing happens, right? Look, this is the weekly time frame, and you have a gold breakout and it barely moves. Like look, you had the all-time high breakout, and then we chopped around the all-time high for basically 4 years. And I think we're basically like the market caps are getting bigger, and we're gonna trade more and more like this, where it's not, you don't necessarily get the free long that you want, but it's still bullish, which fucks over both sides, right? When you think about it, because the bulls, they're like, oh, I'm just gonna slam the leverage, and the bears are like, oh, it's taking so long, this is bearish, and then it doesn't go the way of the bulls, but it also doesn't really go the way of the bears, and then in the end it goes up anyway. That's kind of where I think we're at. Bull market buy all-time high and walk away. I think we're in a different environment now. I don't think like I just explained, I think the all-time high breakout means less. Like back in the day, and this has been the case for a while now, right? Back in the day, when you had an all-time high breakout, the market would just teleport up. We didn't get that in 2021. We had an all-time high break, that was the top. And I don't necessarily think we're gonna get the teleport that people think. I think like legit, we do this. I think that's the most likely scenario, right? Like where we get, especially if this is fueled by Trump in the next few days, we get a little bit of a move up into the 80s, and then maybe like a little bit of consolidation into like a squeeze, and then I think maybe not as long down, but that kind of structure I would not be surprised by. And then I think it would go up probably anyway, like as in like would probably do this anyway. That's kind of where my head's at right now. I love Donald FUD. Man will exit a position and predict the job for 4 years. I mean, no, I'm not even fudding. Like me saying the price is gonna go up, that's a bullish thing. It's just I think people are too like eager to have this thing go to 1 million next Monday. I don't think that's necessarily gonna happen, but it depends, right? Like now it depends a little bit on politics, because Trump, and I mean, hate him or love him, but he talks a lot, and he doesn't necessarily always do what he says. He sounds pretty he sounds pretty convinced and pretty like convincing that he's actually gonna like do the crypto things that he talked about, but it's Trump, you never know, right? So it depends a lot on how he acts now, which is hilarious, right? Like we went from trading a market that was just like an afterthought and no one really cared, to being hunted by the SEC, to now having the president of the United States talk like fucking Trump rugged me on an NFT, right? Like that's the world we live in now, and he's the president now, right? Like I mean, he didn't rug me while he was the president, but he rugged me while he wasn't, and now he is the president. So like that's the world we live in now. It's gonna be an interesting one. Question, Don, how did you realize that you're early to Bitcoin when Bitcoin was like around 1K? Do you see any other opportunities elsewhere right now? If not, how do you spot it? I mean, I knew, like, and that's the thing, right? Like, it always depends. Like, I mean, I got introduced to Bitcoin by my brother at when it was trading at $1. I tried to buy it, couldn't figure out how properly without using a credit card. My mom wouldn't want to give me hers. Like, I asked her, I was like, hey, let me just put in like 50 to 100 like euros. And she was like, nah. And then it rallied from, like, basically I wanted to put everything that I had saved at like $1 or $2 per Bitcoin into Bitcoin. And my mom was like, nah. And I was like, okay, if she doesn't want me to, like, I'm too lazy to figure something else out. And then I watched it go to 1,000, right? And then I saw the bear market, and I was like, this, like, if this is gonna survive, this seems like a decent spot-ish, right? That's kind of how I thought. Like I was like, no one talks about this anymore. If this is gonna survive, this seems like a decent spot, right? I wasn't necessarily like, hey, I like this is gonna go to infinity, but I was like, I mean, this no one in my life knows about this, realistically, like at all, and it's internet, which is the thing that's gonna get big, right? Like anything internet related, I was like, I'm just bullish on the internet, and it's like just generally like a thing that makes sense to me, right? And therefore, I ended up being early, but I could have also been late, right? Because I saw it 1,000x before. But I think like you can just look out for these opportunities in stuff that is pretty obvious to win, right? For me, for example, like the VR and like AR, like virtual reality and artificial reality, like that stuff, there's gonna be opportunities there that are gonna be huge in the future. But right now, it's really hard to find a place where you can actually put money on that. Um, like Meta was a really interesting play. We talked about this when it was like basically at zero. We talked about this on the show actually at the bottom, where I was like, I mean, if you're ever gonna buy this, and I like the vision that Zuckerberg has, then buy it here, and then we'll look at Meta. We talked about this. Did anyone actually like right now in the chat buy it? Because I know there's a few people that actually bought it on that day when you talked about it. But did anyone in the chat right now buy it? And are you still holding? I'm curious. We talked about it here. I was like, this is support, like literally on this monthly. I was like, people are freaking out over nothing, or like over. This is still on YouTube, so you can watch it up. Like if you just look at the shows on the 3rd of October ish, like around there at the bottom, we like Cred and I talked about it. And it was like, this is the place to buy. And it's because the reason why I had like somewhat of a conviction in that one is because I think the VR AR thing is really interesting, and he's just been buying up basically all the VR and other companies that do this, like to do anything with it. So I was a decent bet on that. But yeah, Finn says, yes sir, I bought but sold at 2x, rip. Whenever I open Meta chat, I see your $90 call. Yeah, that was good, huh? Like that was actually quite good. And I've been telling, like, there's one guy in the chat that always like, hey dude, thanks, I'm giga rich because of your Meta call, what should I do now? And I've always told him like, I mean, you have a good entry and I think it's probably gonna go high. Just hold, and I mean, so far so good, right? Man is riding it to infinity. Shit's up like 500 something %. Very Chad. But yeah, it's like stuff like that. So you see something that just makes sense, right? Like people are like, oh, I have to go like super far out there. You really don't. Like stuff sometimes just makes sense. And if you find something that makes sense that is not really that popular, And I think VR, for example, like it's one of the ones. Obviously, still shit experience. I get motion sick and whatever the fuck right now. But I think like if you can find something interesting in that space, like if there's gonna be like anything that works even remotely, and it's gonna pick up some hype, right? Like you don't have to be the guy that buys it before it's hot, right? Like basically how these things go is you get a massive, and I can show you this on the Bitcoin chart. This is how I did it back in the day when I missed it, right? So look, we're actually gonna go back. Is there a better one? Yeah, we can use this one. So we can use this one. So basically, like when I looked at it, I mean, this is all like meaningless. Bitcoin below $1 doesn't really mean anything. I looked at it when it had this run up, right? Basically, like in between down here and up here. I looked at it first time, right? And then it got a run up, and it went to like 1,000. That's what I was talking about earlier. And like things always do this when they're like the interesting things always do this, where they just giga run, right? And then they always overshoot, right? Like you have something that makes a lot of sense to people that goes up, people will herd into it. So it goes through that hype cycle and then falls off. And basically, like, let's say you're talking about like in VR product, VR game, whatever, VR gaming company, all that kind of stuff. Like that's how it's gonna go. Like, it's gonna go through a hype cycle and it's gonna calm down. And then if it's actually something decent, the next one is gonna be basically the one that you want to bet on. Because here, like if you bet on this here, like if I would have bet on it at $1, obviously, like I mean, would have been cool, but it could have just basically went to zero. Anytime, and it's very likely to go to zero. Whereas here on the second leg, right, of the hype cycle, it's much less likely to go to zero. People are still afraid of it, and people are like, "Fuck, I've just torched all my money." But that's the more interesting one. So you don't really have to, like, for example, for me, I don't have to go through every single new development in that whole sector, like the VR sector or whatever. I would just have to see something succeed and kind of like start ebbing again, and then I would try to get like a position or whatever. And that's where the like not surefire way to make money is, but that's where the less risky and still great returns is, right? So basically, you did miss out on $5 Bitcoin to 1,000, which is gonna hurt the shit out of you. I mean, I wasn't too happy about it, but I still got this run up, that cycle, which was plenty enough, and then like plenty enough for, I mean, I wish I had it here obviously, but it was plenty enough for my tiny portfolio to turn into something that I could do it, like could trade crypto full time. So that was enough for me, the second leg, and that's the one that you should be looking for. Something that makes sense equals not memes. I mean, obviously memes are gonna do this too, right? It's just very like when you buy something that is useless inherently, it's more likely to just fizzle out after the big run up, rather than having a second leg. That's why I'm saying something that is actually interesting. But memes, there's a lot of memes that go through this too, where they have a massive run up, they do like pull back a bunch, they go sideways, and then they go up as well. But yeah, hope that makes sense. That's kind of how I look at these things anyway. That's like with a lot of, like it was the same with stuff in DeFi, with like anything in crypto really. Like something new comes up, you have a massive run up. Like one of my first ones, like after so I had that with Bitcoin, right? And then one of my first altcoins that I ever kind of realized this was going on was the Chinese Ethereum. Let me see if I can find a good chart on this. Is this actually a good chart? No, it's not. Is there one with plenty of history? Polonix maybe? No, it wasn't on Bittrex, but Bittrex charts don't really exist anymore, right? like it's too far back even for that. Maybe Binance has it. Nope. So anyway, Neo did the same thing. We basically went from nothing to like, yeah, I wish I could show this on a proper chart. So it went from nothing to like 10 or something, went sideways like this. And I was like, this is gonna be like, people are gonna look for stuff to replace ETH. Like this whole sentiment, this whole narrative makes sense. China was in the headlines as like a dominant player everywhere, and I was like, okay, it's just obviously gonna do the same thing it did before. And then I played it from 10 to 200, and yeah, Neo USD. Let me see if that works. There you go. Thank you. So look at that. Like basically went from 0 to like $10, then like in here basically is where I made my play. So I missed all of that. And then I was like, hey, this just narratively makes a lot of sense. And then I wrote it. And it went all the way to 200. I didn't go like to 200. I sold it 100 something. So that's kind of the stuff, like when you have something new, novel, whatever, this is what you want to look for. Like it goes through a hype cycle and then it recovers. Like, and this was a big dip, right? Like went down 60%, but it was still enough. I hope that makes sense. I mean, and this doesn't always apply. If you see a chart that does this and you're like, Don said I have to buy this on the next pullback, it doesn't have to, right? Like if you're buying a literal Ponzi scheme, this can just happen, right? So it depends. But if you're looking at something actually useful that people get actually excited by, and they're not trying to just pump and dump it, then it's a bit of a different story. The meta episode was October 12, 2022, titled Global Markets at the Brink, 44th minute mark. I can't believe you looked that up. But yeah, there you go. Been to Australia, Don? I actually haven't. Still on the list. Don, if your thesis plays out in a few months, did you say 60K is where you're interested again? I don't know if you explained it recently. I generally think now with Trump in office, we're going to get a bunch of altcoin craziness. I've been shit-talking altcoins for like years and years, like just as a whole. And the only thing that you could have realistically been buying in the last year or so, and that would have made you money, was memes. But I think with Trump, you're gonna see more risk taking from companies, not from people, but from companies, right? So a lot of crypto projects didn't do a token because they were afraid. And I think under Trump that could change. There's gonna be more airdrops, more stuff that would have not went through in the last cycle. So I think that's kind of where it gets interesting. I think Bitcoin could be interesting. Obviously, depends on how large your portfolio is. I think the altcoins are more interesting. Especially if we get like a little bit of a good price movement on Bitcoin, and then people start getting euphoric about the potential in altcoins. And don't get me wrong, like I legit think like 99% of these coins will go to zero, but I still think the bet is so much better on a lot of these than it is on Bitcoin, just short term, just because like I said, there's more potential for like a bunch of people taking advantage of the system, basically. Not being afraid to go to jail is like a big motivator for. There's enough grifters out there to kind of shield people into stuff. They just don't want to go to jail. And I think that's gonna hurt people more than it's gonna make other people money. This is how it always goes. Like the consumer protection is there for a reason, but I think that's probably gonna go out the window. So you're gonna see, if the market just as a whole, if the S&P keeps going, whatever, but I mean, so far so good, right? I think you're gonna see a shitload of fraud happening in crypto, which is good for short-term trading, good for like price appreciation, all that kind of stuff. Just don't think it's long-term necessarily good, but that doesn't really matter, right? Like everyone's here to make money anyway. Time to crank up the Don coin. Yeah, nah. even if it wouldn't land me in jail, like if there was like a way to kind of like do something like this for me, and I mean there's plenty of ways, right? But like starting a project and then rugging it just for the morality of it, I wouldn't do it, even if there was no repercussions. Just not interested. Don, how do you differentiate hype from garbage? For example, this new Mudeng coin or GOAT. I mean, Mudeng was like forced quite a bit, but I'm actually like Mudeng. I actually found quite funny in the way how it traded. Like people just basically went all in on this thing, and then it just went to fucking zero, right? Like that's like, is there a longer history somewhere? Because Binance just isn't it. There we go. Like it was like this was so hype on CT, everyone was talking about it, and then it just literally went went to zero, and then it had a Binance listing. And now that it has a Binance listing, I mean, this is not like the problem with this is that the charting doesn't really matter. It's just the Binance listing that did this thing, and that now I wouldn't want to necessarily fade it anymore because it's Binance listed, right? And GOAT, I don't know how that's actually trading. But that one just made sense to me. We talked about this on this show, right? Where I was like, this actually has a narrative. It's a shitty, like it's stupid, like it's run by a human probably, but at least the story is good, right? So you look for something that differentiates it from the rest. You have infinite meme coins, but you have a meme coin that is supposedly run by an AI, not necessarily. And then that's a good story, and that's probably gonna make it go up more than one without the good story. How is the Trump NFT doing? I think it went to zero, basically. I'm not entirely sure, though. Like, I think it's... Like, anyone in the chat that still has some that can tell us how it's doing. I mean, it'd be shocking. Like, Trump is the... Like, and this is why, like, there was a reason why I bought the Trump NFT, right? I was like, the moment he becomes president again, which wasn't so unlikely, I'm going to make a shitload of money. And then he just launched, like, 5 of them. Which just kind of ruined it. That would have been a cool trade. Like I was like, that's gonna make a shitload of money the moment he becomes president again. But he just couldn't help himself and kept making new ones. Is there no way of you getting access to Binance futures in Germany? Surely there's a loophole for big money. I mean, now it's like I can trade normally again. The law was changed. Don't quote me on this and don't take this as legal advice, but I think last month it changed. You can probably trade again as a German citizen. But look it up yourself if you're German. Don't take my word for it. But there's no problem anymore. But yeah, let's talk about ETH real quick. I like it. ETH BTC rallied a little bit, but this chart still looks like shit, right? Like, don't delude yourself. I've had a few people that were talking about ETH BTC and how great it is. It's still shit, right? It did bounce where I wanted it to bounce, but it's still shit. The good part about it being shit is that the upside potential is larger than it otherwise would be, right? Like a shit chart has more upside potential than otherwise. So if this comes back in the range, you have like a 50-60% move against Bitcoin, which is quite nice. But that's not the really interesting chart. The interesting chart is ETH USD, and look at that monthly hit support, held a bunch going up this month, and the weekly time frame, like this stupid ascending triangle, actually playing out quite nicely, also breaking out. It's in the area now that I want to see reclaimed, right? So like at 2.8, 2.9, this is where like it really where it gets a little bit dicey. But if it comes back above 3K, I think there's a good chance that we just make a new all-time high. And on the daily time frame, you had that ascending triangle too. A little bit of a false breakdown, which is good. Like that's generally like a good signal when you get like a false breakdown into strength. And as long as like 2.7k holds, this just looks good to me. Don't really see a good reason to be bearish on ETH. And I mean, Bitcoin, same story, right? Good part about both of those is that invalidation is quite close, right? So on ETH, a retrace of today, if it comes back here, like, fuck no. So invalidation is quite close, targets are quite far. So that's like a decent trade still, I think. I sold somewhere at like here or there. I don't remember, I think it was this. Could see myself take that trade again. Basically, like I just take the trade and target higher. Not entirely sure yet. I've been getting fucked in real life, but I think that's the most interesting trade that I'm looking at, just because invalidation is so close. As in, if it doesn't work out, it's not a loss, really, realistically. Your baby's calling, yeah. Like I told you guys, she's teething. She's not calling for me though. She's my wife's with her. But it's been, as you can hear, it's been a little bit rough. She's upset. Don, did you only long or also you did short trades? I mean, I shorted it back in the days. I shorted a lot. Yeah, that's what I got famous for. I shorted the 2017. Like that's where my Twitter account comes from. I was like, people are delusional. This is gonna crash, and I made a Twitter account, and that was the whole theme. I was like, this shit's going down, and then I shorted from like 18 all the way down to like down here. Closed it, and then I managed to short here and added a bunch here, and then rode all of the way down. So like that's where my Twitter account comes from. If you're wondering like, hey, how did Don get started on Twitter? I was a bear tart at the start. Like I had a Twitter, but I never used it, and then I started posting at the top, basically. I was like, this shit's going down. And then actually back then, Kobe actually retweeted me and was like, this is good stuff. And I had like 1,000 followers or something. And then that kickstarted everything a little bit. And the market going immediately down. And I had a bunch of people, basically Kobe retweeted me. I was like, I didn't really say anything, but he retweeted me, I think. And then a bunch of people, like the big paid group guys basically came into my comments and were like, this guy's an idiot. We're going to infinity, and that gave the post even more eyes, and then the whole market and the whole sector just completely vanished, and everyone was like, oh shit, this guy actually called it. So former bear, I mean, I was beyond bullish on the way up. I'm neither bear nor bull. I was bearish, like I was beyond bullish from nothing to 10k, and then I was like, okay, it's getting a little bit crazy now. Where do I take my exit? And then I sold all my stuff somewhere here in this thing, like up here, and then I turned really bearish, and then I turned really, really bullish on this blue. Like I was like, this shit's going up again, and I bought a bunch here, and I got fucked for a while, and I bought more down here, and actually got rewarded for it quite a while, and then I was a bear tart again here before the COVID thing. Like I heard of the COVID stuff early, and I was like, we're kind of fucked just generally, and yeah, and then I was a bear tart again somewhere, I think in here, and it went up instead. I was like, oh shit, I was wrong. And then I went bull tart here, went bear tart again here, was wrong. Like, I mean, I switch my minds. Like from time to time. So like, it's just how it goes. Just trade this thing. So I nailed pretty much everything from 2017 all the way to basically this breakout. Like I was always right, and then I got like took a good sized loss. Like I was bullish down at 10, and then I got bearish at 13, 14, and took that loss at like 16, 17 or something, which was not great. But is what it is. So yeah, ETH looking good to me on the daily, on the weekly, monthly also not that bad. I like the narrative. I like the just generally talking about narratives. Trump being the person that he is, there's a good chance he launches a coin or whatever. He launched an NFT before. I don't think he would necessarily have a big problem with DeFi. And DeFi has kind of been struggling because of the US going after it, like one of the many reasons. And I like the narrative that that's going to put some life into it. And I like the narrative that that's going to be on ETH mainly. So I was already like thinking that the sentiment on ETH was too bad. I think now is like a good time to kind of run it back. Don't know if that's going to happen. The market has to stay up for that, but not hating. Why were you bearish there at 14K? Here you go. So I was like, we closed here at 14K, and I was like, this is the last place to be bearish, so I'm going to be bearish. And then basically there was like 2 weeks of upsides, and it was like 17, 18K. I was like, there's no way we're going to close back below it, so I'm gonna close everything and concede that I was wrong. And then I was wrong, and it kept running. And then I mean, I was bullish until basically like this started breaking out here, and I was like, and I did the same reasoning, right? Like back in 2021, I was like, there's no reason. I still remember this, and there's still this show recorded on YouTube. I was like, there's no reason to be bearish. I kind of got bearish feelings, but I was like, there's no real good reason to be bearish until we close back below 60K. And then we did, and we had a little bit of an uptick the next month. I was like, okay, you gotta be bearish now. And then it went down. So basically the same exact reason that I told you earlier here, where I was like, hey, there's no reason to be bearish, but if we start losing 70K, that'd be a really strong indicator. It's the same reason that I used in 2021. I've been like, with this kind of stuff, the high time frames and everything, I've been very consistent. You don't need to nail the top, right? Like I sold 60K-ish, like 59 or something. And that was like quite a bit away from all-time high. Like all-time high was 69K. So 10K difference. And I think like no one was like, oh, like at 16K, no one was like, oh, you idiot, sold at 60, not at 70. You don't have to nail the top. It's just when it gives you good reason to be bearish, take it. But until then, I mean, we'll just let it run. Until now, when you have betrayed us, bulls, just before we go to 100K, I mean, I'm just not trading. Don't really feel like it right now. I mean, you can hear the baby screaming in the back. Imagine me sitting here, like, looking at positions, being like, oh, like, fuck no. I'd rather just not. I get little sleep as is already, and the second baby's on the way, so it's not like I need to add some more work on my plate. So did you change your stance on cycle top now that Trump is in office? I mean, we traded here, and I was like, cycle top's in, and then it nuked, and it came back up, and it nuked again, and I actually changed my mind at 58K. That's why I bought 58. So I bought 58K here. I was like, I think my cycle top thing was wrong, given how this played out. It went up, went down. I was on vacation, came back where it was trading above 58K, and I was like, okay, my cycle top idea was wrong. I generally still think that this is good, like intermediate kind of play, where I think it's gonna go up and then probably sideways and then down. Might not take as long. Could just be that it does this, does this, and then goes down, goes sideways, and then goes back up. I generally think it's probably gonna trade similar to how it traded in 2000. Where is it? I mean, I basically think it's gonna do something like this, but without the dump after. So basically like stabilize and go up. But could be wrong, I don't know. I just generally think a lot of people are gonna get on the Trump train, Bitcoin to infinity, and then they're gonna get overlevered the moment this goes up a little bit. So right now, I don't think that's necessarily the case. But I think basically, if we move above 80K, all hell will break loose and people are gonna lose their minds. And I think between 80 and 90K, you're gonna see a bunch of idiots trading, and I think they're gonna get taken advantage of. That's kind of what I think. Doesn't have to happen though. And if Trump is bailing people out, if he starts buying Bitcoin by the boatload, maybe it just doesn't happen. But if you remember, the reason why I'm saying it, this is what I was talking about earlier. ETF announcement, infinity, all the way back down. I think that's basically like Trump, infinity, back down, and then up. That's kind of what I think. Like similar to how this played out, but who knows? Is Doge still a good shout? Yeah, I mean, I said, the one thing that I said, I was like, if you think Trump wins, just buy Doge. It's the better play than Bitcoin. And this is so correct. It's actually incredible how that played out. Bitcoin is 2% higher than where it was when before the pullback, before Trump was announced president. Doge just like went completely nuts. That went up like on that announcement, went up like infinite. Like look, basically like the moment it was obvious that Trump was just winning, just went infinite. Still think that looks good. Yeah, I think that's probably the coin to play if you want meme exposure without going and buying something really dumb, even though Doge is dumb, but there's dumber shit out there, while having, I mean, the whole Elon thing on your side. Makes a lot of sense. I think Doge is one of the ones that, like, just generally, if the market does well, Doge is going to do better. I think just generally Doge is going to be a better play than Bitcoin for this cycle, however long it's still going to take. Like... Sorry about that. She's very loud. It's not happy. ETH to 90K. That's a little bit. It's a little bit a lot. I don't think that's necessarily gonna happen. But yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at these things. I like ETH. The narrative. The price action so far, at least on the USD pair, has confirmed that it makes a little bit of sense. It's at resistance right now, like pretty much exactly at resistance. If it breaks that, I think there's little holding it back. If it doesn't, and if it falls back down, I think that would start looking really bad. Because basically, right now, we're in the situation where we have all the reasons to go up. If we don't go up, even though we have all the reasons, reason being, we have an all-time high breakout. We have Trump as the president. Trump said that he would buy a bunch of Bitcoin. So, like, all of those things combined with the S&P going up, which it has, like, there's all the reasons to go up. If it doesn't go up, there's a problem, right? And then you should be bearish. But until that happens, why be bearish? There you go. Any thoughts on Sol? Sol is also interesting. Also, like, somewhat at resistance. We talked about this when it was here the first time around, when it was at this like confidential resistance on Sol BTC. Right? I was like, this is the area where it needs to get through. It didn't. Now we're back. I still want to see it go through like that area, and then we can talk about it. Like anything above there, yes. Right now, like it's still technically downtrending. Obviously, big uptrend, you could say it's just sideways. But like if you want to make the bullish argument, you can be like, hey, there's like an ascending, not an ascending, like a triangle just generally, like it's going sideways here, higher lows, higher lows, lower highs. It's gonna break eventually. And to that, I would say, like, I mean, fair point, right? But I want to see it break out here. And on the USD pair, I mean, that's just carried by Bitcoin. Same resistance. I mean, looks a little bit worse than Bitcoin does, honestly. Like Bitcoin clearly above the highs. Jesus, I've ruined my chart by drawing on it. Solana below it. But yeah, the moment it breaks out of 200, I think Solana could teleport. So if Bitcoin shows some strength, carries it above 200, you could get some Sol BT strength just off of that. And then if it teleports, you could have a nice move. So I'm not particularly bearish on Solana. It doesn't really make much sense anyway. Like if you're bullish Bitcoin, why be bearish Solana? But yeah, same problem as ETH. Basically, like on USD, on the USD pair, you are at clear resistance, but it's the third test. On the Bitcoin pair, it's technically, to me at least, not bullish yet. But I mean, ETH-BTC isn't either. And I've been like, hey, like last week I was like, this is an area that is interesting. It went up. Technically speaking, the only reason why I found it interesting is because of the USD pair, right? So if this goes up a little bit more above 200, there's no real resistance left. And Bitcoin right now, quite strong, even on the low time frames. So if that runs a little bit, could take Solana above 200, and then from 200, like you can easily get a move to 250 or something. She needs steady, yeah. That's why I'm gonna call it a day. Like I'm gonna see what's up. Sorry about that, a little bit shorter than usual. Is it actually? No, actually we ran an hour. Jesus Christ, time flies. But yeah, I'm gonna go check how my daughter's doing. But yeah, big shout out to Wu for sponsoring the show. Really appreciate their support. I hope this helped. If not, I mean, why are you even watching? If not, but yeah, that's kind of my view on the market. Looks decent. Don't see a good reason to hate. Therefore, I don't hate. I think that's generally a good way to go about things. Much love. See you guys next time. Bye bye.